The desert sun leaned low, painting the land in copper and red, as if the earth itself were bleeding beneath the sky. Dust clung to the wind, carrying the dry scent of mesquite and old sorrow. Along the riverbank, 4 Apache sisters gathered water, their laughter echoing softly like bells in the canyon. They were young, strong, alive with hope, unaware that shadows watched from the cottonwood trees. From the ridge above, 6 outlaws sat astride their horses. Their faces were hidden beneath dust-crusted hats, eyes narrow, voices low. The leader, a scar-faced man known only as Cutter, spat tobacco into the dirt and gave a nod. The gang rode down like wolves on prey. The sisters barely had time to scream. Buckskin lassos whistled through the air, ropes tightening around wrists. The river churned as feet splashed, pottery shattered, and the laughter turned to terror. Within moments, the sisters were dragged from the water's edge, bound and beaten, their cries swallowed by the desert silence. Miles away, a lone rider moved slowly through the canyon. His horse, an old bay with a scarred flank, carried him steady. The cowboy's name was Elias Kane, a drifter, gray at the temples, his eyes worn from years of watching men destroy one another. He had come this way chasing no dream, no promise of gold, no land to call his own. Only silence, only distance from the past. But silence has a way of breaking. As Elias reached the river, he found broken pottery glittering in the sand, a scarf torn on a thorn bush, and hoof prints gouged deep into the earth. He knelt, his calloused hand brushing the marks, his jaw tightening. He heard it then. Faintly, far off, the desperate cry of a woman carried on the wind. His eyes narrowed. He touched the scar on his jaw, the one he earned years ago when he turned his back on a fight he should have faced. Not this time. Not again. He mounted his horse, spurred hard, and rode toward the sound. As the outlaw gang pushed their captives toward the border trail, Cutter sneered at the struggling sisters. "Ain't no law out here," he growled, "and ain't nobody coming for you." But the dust cloud behind them was growing. A rider was coming, and with him rode a storm that would turn the river red. The sun had climbed high by the time Elias Kane closed the distance. From the canyon ridge he watched the outlaw gang driving their captives hard toward the water. The sisters stumbled, their bare feet cut by stone and thorn. Cutter's whip cracked in the air, his voice barking curses. The Rio Sangre lay ahead, swollen from spring rains, its current raging like a beast. The gang meant to cross before anyone could follow, but Elias Kane was already there, hidden among the rocks, rifle in hand. He studied them through the sights, his breath steady. He could kill Cutter now. One squeeze, one bullet, but the sisters were too close, too exposed. No, he would wait. A patient man lives longer than a quick one. The gang reached the riverbank, their horses snorting nervously at the roar of the water. Cutter barked, "Move 'em across!" The sisters cried out, refusing to wade into the torrent. Cutter struck one with the butt of his pistol and she fell to her knees. Elias Kane's jaw tightened. His finger brushed the trigger, but still he held. The time wasn't right. Not yet. Then the youngest sister made a desperate move. With bound hands, she hurled herself sideways, crashing into one of the outlaws. Both fell into the mud. Chaos erupted, the gang shouting, horses rearing. Cutter drew his pistol. That was when Elias struck. A rifle crack split the air. The outlaw's hat exploded into the river. Another shot. A second man clutched his arm, spinning in pain. Cutter whirled, eyes scanning the cliffs. "We got company," he roared. Elias fired again, knocking a rifle from one outlaw's hands. The sisters screamed as the gang scrambled for cover. Bullets screamed across the canyon, chipping stone and filling the air with powder smoke. One of the sisters fell into the river, dragged by the current. Elias didn't think. He slung his rifle, leapt from the ridge, and dove into the water below. The cold hit him like a hammer, but his arms churned, fighting the current until he reached her. Her eyes were wide with terror, her lips gasping for air as the river pulled them both downstream. On the bank, Cutter cursed. "Let the river take 'em. Move the others." Two outlaws dragged the remaining sisters toward the far shore, but Elias emerged from the water, hauling the youngest girl in his arms. He shoved her behind a rock and ripped the ropes from her wrists. "You stay down," he growled, water dripping from his hat brim. She stared at him, shocked, but nodded. Gunfire erupted again. Elias fired back, his Colt barking thunder. Dust exploded around Cutter as bullets tore past. The outlaw leader snarled, his scar twisting like a snake. "I want that drifter's head." The river became a battleground, bullets, splashes, and cries mingling with the roar of the current. Elias dragged the rescued girl behind cover, his breath ragged. He counted the outlaws. 5 left, 3 still driving the other sisters across the river, 2 circling to flank him. The odds were long, too long. But Elias Kane wasn't a man who counted odds anymore. He loaded another round, eyes narrowing as the fight turned bloodier by the second. The river foamed red where the first outlaw floated lifeless downstream. This was no rescue. This was war. Night fell heavy over the desert, cloaking the land in silver and shadow. The river's roar faded into silence as Elias Kane led the youngest sister, her name was Nalin, into the scrublands beyond. She was trembling, half from cold, half from shock, her eyes darting back toward the canyon where her sisters had been dragged away. "We'll get 'em," Elias said low, his voice rough as gravel. "But we gotta live to fight first." Nalin nodded, clutching his coat sleeve, her breath shallow. She had never known a white man to help her people. She studied his face by moonlight, stern, scarred, but not cruel. Something in his eyes carried weight, the weight of a man who had lost more than he ever wanted to admit. Behind them, Cutter and his gang lit torches, their shouts echoing. The hunt was on. Elias pushed forward through the mesquite, moving like a shadow. He knew the desert better than most, knew where a man could vanish and where he'd be run down. But he also knew the outlaws had numbers. And when a pack smells blood, they don't stop. By midnight, the chase closed in. Gunfire shattered the night. Bullets tore through cactus, sparks lit against stone. Elias shoved Nalin into a dry arroyo, pressing her flat against the dirt. He fired back, one outlaw tumbling from his horse with a scream. But they couldn't run forever. Not with a child and not against men who had ridden these trails their whole lives. Elias needed an edge. When the shooting died down, he found it. An old mine shaft yawned black against the rocks, abandoned, half collapsed. Dangerous, but shelter. He guided Nalin inside, torches flickering past as the outlaws thundered by overhead. Inside the mine, the air smelled of dust and old death. Timber creaked, rocks shifted. They sat in silence, only the sound of Nalin's breath filling the dark. She whispered, "Why help us? You don't owe us." Elias stared at the dirt floor, his hand tightening around his revolver. "Once, I turned my back, cost people their lives. I don't run no more." The girl studied him, then nodded. Trust, fragile but real, began to take root. At dawn, they slipped from the mine, heading deeper into the desert. But Cutter wasn't far. He'd left 2 men to double back. As Elias and Nalin reached a ridge, rifles cracked. Dust exploded around them. Elias returned fire, dropping 1 man clean. The other fled, but not before Elias saw his face. It was a face he knew. Jed Harlan, an old partner, a man Elias once rode with, long before he quit the outlaw life. Jed's eyes met his across the distance. Recognition burned. And then Jed vanished back into the canyon, no doubt to tell Cutter the truth. Elias Kane wasn't just some drifter. He was one of them, once. By mid-morning, Elias and Nalin found tracks. Fresh horse prints, women's footprints dragging behind. The sisters were still alive, but being driven hard south toward the border. Elias touched the dirt, then looked to Nalin. "We got one chance," he said. "But when Cutter learns who I am, it'll be more than a rescue. It'll be a reckoning." The girl's eyes widened. "You mean they know you?" Elias didn't answer. He just saddled up, jaw set tight. The desert wind howled, carrying dust across the sky like smoke. Ahead lay the trail of blood, and behind, the ghosts of a past he could never outrun. The desert stretched endless, a cruel expanse of stone and sand. Elias, Kane, and Nayland trailed Cutter's gang for 2 days, keeping low, hiding by night, moving only at dawn and dusk. The girl grew weary, her steps faltering, but Elias pushed her forward. He knew what waited if they fell behind. On the third evening, as the sun bled out over the horizon, Elias caught sight of smoke. A camp. Cutter's men. The sisters. He crawled close, eyes fixed on the firelight. The women sat bound near the flames, their faces hollow with exhaustion. Cutter loomed beside them, drinking from a bottle, his scar twisted in the fire's glow. Around him, the gang laughed, cursed, and argued, and then Elias saw him. Jed Harlan, the old friend. The traitor. Jed leaned close to Cutter, voice low but sharp. "It's Kane. Elias Kane. I rode with him once. He ain't no stranger. He's a turncoat, and if he's sniffing after us, he won't stop." Cutter spat into the fire. "Then we make him stop." Elias pulled back into the shadows, heart heavy. His past had caught up at last. Nayland clutched his arm, whispering, "What do we do?" "We wait," he said, but his jaw was tight. He wasn't a man who liked waiting. That night Elias made his move. He slid through the dark, knife in hand, cutting the ropes on one of the sisters as the gang snored in drunken slumber. But just as freedom brushed their fingertips, a boot crunched on gravel. A gun cocked. "Thought you'd come sneakin'," Jed's voice drawled from the dark. The camp erupted. Torches flared. Rifles rose. Elias shoved the girl toward the brush, but fists crashed into his skull. Stars burst across his vision. Then blackness. When he woke, the desert sky was blazing noon. His hands were chained, his body tied to a post, the sun baking him like meat. Cutter stood before him, whip coiled in hand, eyes cold as steel. "You should have stayed gone, Kane," he sneered. "But you had to come back. Always did have that itch for playing hero." The whip cracked, tearing across Elias's chest. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give Cutter the satisfaction of a scream. The sisters wept as they watched, powerless, their wrists raw from the ropes that bound them. Jed crouched nearby, studying Elias. "Could have been you with us still," he said, voice almost pitying. "But you turned soft. You walked away. That don't sit well with Cutter. Don't sit well with me neither." Elias spat blood into the dust. "Better soft than rotten." The whip fell again, and again. Blood dripped into the sand, dark as oil. By nightfall, Elias hung limp, barely conscious, the desert wind cooling his torn flesh. Cutter leaned close, his scarred face inches away. "Tomorrow, we cross the border. The women get sold. You die slow. Vultures'll do the burying." But as Cutter walked away, Elias's head lifted just enough to see Nayland. She had not been caught when he was taken. In the brush beyond the fire, her small figure crouched, eyes wide with fury. She pressed a finger to her lips. Wait. Hope flickered like a dying flame. The outlaws slept. The sisters wept. And in the dark, Elias Kane began to twist against the chains, blood slickening his wrists. He was down, broken, but not done. Not yet. Dawn came slow. The desert painted in fire and ash. Cutter's gang broke camp, pushing the 3 captive sisters onto tired horses. Elias Kane, half dead from whip and sun, was dragged behind, his wrists bound, his body stumbling through dust. Every step was pain, but his eyes still burned. Nayland trailed them unseen, her small figure hidden in the scrub. She had stolen a knife from the camp, and her heart beat with courage beyond her years. By noon, the gang reached the border, the Rio Sangre once more, swollen and violent, its waters foaming red in the morning light. A trader waited on the far shore, a man with gold teeth and greed in his eyes. He counted silver in his hand, ready to buy the sisters like cattle. Cutter grinned, scar twisting. "Easy money, boys. After this, we ride free." But freedom was not theirs to take. Elias stumbled at the river's edge, collapsing to his knees. Cutter shoved him with a boot, laughing. "Look at you, Cain. Once a wolf, now a dog." Elias lifted his head slowly. His lips cracked into something like a smile. "You forgot one thing." Before Cutter could react, a figure rose from the brush. Nolan, fierce, defiant, slashed through Elias's bonds with the stolen knife. In one motion, Elias surged up, grabbing Cutter's own pistol from his holster. The desert exploded. A shot cracked. Cutter staggered back, his scarred face painted with shock. Then chaos. Elias fired again, dropping a man before he could draw. The sisters screamed, scattering as bullets ripped the air. Nolan dragged one into cover while Elias waded forward, fury burning through his battered body. "Get him!" Jed shouted, drawing steel. He charged, blade flashing in the sun. Elias met him head-on. The two old partners clashed, fists and steel, memories bleeding into rage. Jed's knife carved across Elias's ribs, but Elias seized his wrist, twisted, and drove the blade into Jed's gut. Jed's eyes widened, pain and regret mixing as blood poured. "You chose wrong," Elias growled, pushing him into the dust. Cutter roared, firing wildly, driving the sisters toward the water. Elias took cover behind a boulder, bullets tearing stone beside him. The trader on the far shore fled, dropping silver into the river as he vanished. It came down to two men, Cutter and Cain. The river roared between them, swollen, angry, red with morning light. Elias stepped out, revolver in hand, his chest heaving. Cutter sneered, his scar twisting into a grin. "Always knew it'd be you, Cain. Always knew you didn't have the guts to stay bad." Elias raised his gun, voice low and steady. "And I always knew you didn't have the guts to be good." The guns barked as one. Dust leapt. Echoes thundered. Cutter's grin faltered as blood bloomed on his chest. He staggered, dropped his pistol, and fell backward into the river. The current seized him, dragging his body into the foam until the scarred face vanished beneath red water. Silence. Only the river spoke. Elias lowered his pistol, breath ragged, body trembling. The sisters gathered, their tears mixed with relief and grief. Nolan clutched his arm, whispering, "It's over." But Elias shook his head. "It ain't ever over. Men like Cutter come back in different faces, different names. But today..." He glanced at the river where the scarred outlaw had vanished. "Today's enough." Together they walked from the water's edge, leaving behind the silver, the corpses, and the ghosts. The Rio Sangre carried the dead away, its name truer than ever. As the sun climbed high, Elias Cain led the sisters back toward their homeland. A broken man, maybe, but not a useless one. Not anymore. Not. And as the desert wind howled over the canyon, the story of the cowboy and the 4 Apache women was carried with it. A story of blood, of survival, and of the price of justice beneath an unforgiving sky.